Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Yana Johnson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Alistair Cooper. We warmly welcome the family of Flight Lieutenant Francis Walker Grosvenor, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors and students from Christian College Geelong, Victoria. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this National Memorial Museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which he remained true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Flight Lieutenant Francis Walker Grosvenor. Francis Grosvenor was born on the 8th of May 1922 in the Sydney suburb of Marrickville. The younger son of Cowley and Jeannie Grosvenor, he was known as Frank to his family and friends, and later lived in Manly. He worked as an insurance clerk at T&G Life Society in Sydney, and also served for 11 months in the 1st Machine Gun Regiment, a Sydney Reserve militia. Grosvenor enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 7th of January 1941. His brother Douglas and sister June also served in the Air Force during the Second World War. After enlisting, Grosvenor began training at Bradfield Park to the north of Sydney, and later at Narrandera in the New South Wales Riverina area. In 1941, he embarked from Sydney for Canada, where he participated in the Empire Air Training Scheme. In this program, airmen from across the British Empire were brought together to train in Canada and then deployed for service in various Allied air forces as required. In September 1941, he sailed from Canada for England, where, after a brief period of further training, he joined RAF No. 118 Squadron, which at that time was based in Ibsley, Hampshire. No. 118 Squadron flew Spitfire fighter aircraft in support of anti-shipping raids over the English Channel and on bombing raids over occupied France. Grosvenor flew his last flight with No. 118 Squadron in March 1942, and by May of that year was back in Australia, ready to serve in the war in the Pacific. In June 1942, Grosvenor joined RAAF Squadron No. 76 Squadron, which flew P-40 Kitty Hawk fighter aircraft. He arrived just as the squadron was transferring from Townsville, Queensland, to Milne Bay on the southeast tip of Papua. From Milne Bay, No. 76 Squadron, in unison with No. 75 Squadron, formed part of the defences of Port Moresby, which was expected as a likely target for Japanese attack. On the 24th of August 1942, No. 75 and 76 Squadrons engaged Japanese aircraft attacking Allied positions in preparation for the large Japanese landing at Milne Bay, which began in the early hours of the 25th of August. From this date until the 3rd of September, Grosvenor and his unit assisted Australian and American forces by strafing Japanese troops, barges and stores. The air fight over Milne Bay was a chaotic and dangerous time for pilots. During the battle, Grosvenor was lucky to survive after his P-40 Kitty Hawk was shot down and crashed into the jungle. The Battle of Milne Bay was the first defeat of the Japanese on land in the Second World War, and Lieutenant General Sidney Rao, commander of the New Guinea Force, later commented that the air support provided by the Australian fighter squadrons in this battle was the decisive factor. After the Battle of Milne Bay, Grosvenor returned to Australia to take up an instructing role. This role was vital for the war effort, as experienced pilots such as Grosvenor were able to pass on their skills to train new airmen. On the 11th of August 1944, Grosvenor conducted a flight to test the carburettor of a Kitty Hawk aircraft at the No. 3 Aircraft Depot at Amberley, Queensland. During the test flight, he was performing a dive manoeuvre from the northwest side of the aerodrome when, at a height of about 300 metres, the port side tail wing of his aircraft broke off. The plane began to disintegrate mid-air before striking the ground at high speed and bursting into flames. Flight Lieutenant Grosvenor was killed instantly. He was 22 years old. Today, his remains lie buried in Ipswich General Cemetery, where over 100 servicemen of the Second World War now lie. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Lieutenant Francis Walker Grosvenor, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and we wish you all a very good evening.